the story behind the world's most terrifying haunted dolls. In 1991, a woman donated an old doll to the Canal and District Museum in British Columbia, Canada. She told the museum's curator the doll was old, and she didn't want her daughter to play with it. It's believed the doll is at least a century old. The doll's name is Mandy. For a doll, Mandy is creepy looking. Her eyes are made of glass and her right one was cracked. Her clothing also needed a good cleaning. Mandy wasn't ready for an audience and needed mending before her public unveiling. Museum staff placed Mandy inside a plastic bag to make sure any insects that might be inside the doll would die. Although no insects were inside the bag, employees claimed the doll changed positions and the bag rustled by itself. Staff members felt uncomfortable with the doll from the moment it arrived. Before museum staff placed Mandy into her display, she was left in a room alone. When staff returned the next morning, the entire room was in disarray. It appeared as if someone had tossed the lighter items around and pushed the larger items onto the floor. And since no one had been in the room, the only reasonable explanation was Mandy had thrown a tantrum and destroyed the room. But that made no sense. Dolls aren't alive. The museum brought in a psychic to examine Mandy. The psychic claimed the spirit of a deceased little girl possessed the porcelain doll. According to legend, the girl who occupies Mandy got trapped and died in her basement. She died holding Mandy. Somehow, the child's spirit transferred into the doll where it remains today. Obviously, the psychic's comments stirred up much curiosity in the curator. She visited the doll's donor to find out more about Mandy. The curator soon learned the truth. The woman didn't get rid of the doll because of her daughter as she had originally claimed. What she told the curator next was downright terrifying. The woman claimed she heard a baby crying in her basement. She then went into the basement to investigate. Nothing. It was just Mandy in an open window with a breeze blowing on the curtains. But who opened the window? Apparently this happened regularly. The donor decided to find a new home for Mandy. Once she donated Mandy to the museum, the crying stopped. Museum visitors claim they feel an uneasiness whenever they see Mandy. Employees claim she has tapped on her glass enclosure. At one time a toy lamb was placed inside Mandy's case, which didn't thrill Mandy because the lamb was found outside the case. The doll hasn't ever harmed anyone. Supposedly, she is childlike and just throws temper tantrums whenever she is unhappy. Mandy is also known as a prankster and enjoys playing pranks on museum employees and volunteers. Employee lunches, pens, pictures, and personal items have disappeared. Some items show up while others are still missing. Many claims about Mandy seem absurd. But it would be impossible to discount every story about Mandy. It's also been said her eyes and fingers can move. Supposedly, the uneasiness created by her has to do with her eyes following your every step. She also has a fascination with electrical items. People have tried to record her with a video camera only to have the camera stop working. Mandy has many likenesses to another famous scary doll named Robert. Both are creepy looking and enjoy disrupting electronic devices. Mandy's story is fascinating. In 1999, a book titled Supernatural Stories Around British Columbia profiled Mandy and the museum. Is it possible for a spirit to possess an inanimate toy or a doll? It depends on who you ask. I am sure many skeptics will scoff at anything considered unnatural. But for those who believe in the supernatural, it's not unreasonable to give some credence to those who have dealt with mysterious anomalies like Robert the doll or even Mandy. Ever since the Conjuring film was released, followed by the Annabelle movie in 2014, rumors have swirled about the Warren duo. And the true story behind the Annabelle doll. Was the real Annabelle doll quite as vindictive and evil as the doll in the film? Did the Warrens really keep a doll with a demon attached to it? Although the real-life Annabelle doll was a Raggedy Ann doll, nowhere near as frightening in appearance as the porcelain doll in the film, many of the details were frighteningly similar. Let's dive into the details and learn more about the Annabelle true story. The real Annabelle was given to Donna, who was a student nurse, as a birthday gift by her mother. One thing to remember, Annabelle was bought second-hand from a hobby store. She was living with her friend Angie at the time, and Donna was delighted with the gift. At first. But the Conjuring doll quickly became a source of great fear for the girls. Annabelle made only very small movements to begin with, that could be put down to Donna and Angie accidentally moving her, for example, ending up on the floor instead of on the chair. Maybe she just fell off. Soon though, the movement started to increase, and the doll started to move more. For example, she may have ended up on the couch instead of on Donna's bed, or outside Angie's door immediately after she was returned to Donna's room. Their close friend Lou was very nervous of the seemingly innocent raggedy doll. He believed that she was evil, or possessed, and that something needed to be done about it. But Donna and Annie were very progressive in their views and didn't think anything of the sort. They still believed that perhaps they were to blame for the movements of the doll. The Annabelle doll story quickly became more sinister. Soon, the girls started to find notes around their apartment. The strange thing was that the notes were written on parchment paper, and neither of the two girls had ever used parchment paper before. The notes said various things, but most commonly, they said things like, "Help Lou, help us." Finally, the doll from The Conjuring, Annabelle, was found with blood on her hands. Donna came home from work one day and found the doll in her usual spot on her bed, which made a change, but unfortunately she had literal blood on her hands. It seemed almost like the blood, or the red liquid, whatever it was coming from the doll itself. That was it. It was time for the girls to call in some help in the form of a medium to find out just what was going on with this doll before things got worse. The first medium sat down with the girls and Annabelle, and the story that Donna and Angie were given was that the land on which their apartment complex was built used to be a field. A young girl, aged around 7 years old, was found dead there many years before. When the doll came into their apartment, Annabelle's spirit was still in the area in which she died, and because she was fond of the doll, her spirit became one with it. Annabelle became Annabelle the doll. Unfortunately for the girls, Annabelle became Annabelle the haunted doll. Donna and Angie were very loving and giving, however, and because they felt sorry for the poor girl that had been found dead alone in that field, they wanted the doll to stay because they didn't want her to be left alone. Lou was the one who was attacked by Annabelle before the Warrens were called in. Maybe she didn't like him, or maybe he reminded her of a man who had treated her badly in life, but he was the one that she showed her true self to. A few things occurred, including some bad dreams and some visions of Annabelle, but the attack that made Donna and Angie call the Warrens was a physical one. Angie and Lou were spending some time together when they heard movement in Donna's room, but she wasn't at home. They were frozen in fear. At first they were concerned about an intruder, but they quickly realized that the movement was in fact Annabelle. Lou took a look inside Donna's room and there was no one inside, although the doll was sitting on a chair instead of sitting on the bed where she should have been. He moved forwards toward Annabelle and a feeling crept over him, that creeping feeling you get where something is terribly wrong. He felt a terrible pain on his chest, and realized that there was a series of claw marks, raking marks like someone had leapt at him and roughly scratched him. No one was in the room, and so he knew that the marks must have come from Annabelle. What was stranger still about these scratches is that they healed straight away and within just 2 days there was no trace of them at all. The Warrens were then called in. A priest was called into the apartment along with the Warrens and it was discovered that Annabelle's main goal was to take possession of Donna's soul. Annabelle was a demon. She was attached to the doll. The Warrens said that demons don't possess items or things, instead, they possess people. The priest eventually exorcised the apartment, and the Warrens took Annabelle away with them. They both agreed that it would be best to drive home on the back roads, worried that if they drove on the main highways that Annabelle would find a way to cause an accident. Sure enough, they were plagued with car problems the whole way home. The power steering failed, the brakes failed and the engine of the car kept stalling. The problems ceased for a little while once Ed Warren sprinkled Annabelle with some holy water. Once the pair got home, Ed put the doll on his desk, thinking that she'd be safe there for a little while. Soon, she showed them what she was really made of. Annabelle was seen rising above the desk, levitating, on multiple occasions. Soon, that activity slowed down and stopped, and the Warrens thought that perhaps the demon had quieted. But she was soon found in different rooms of the house, moving around, and when the Warrens put her in one place she would quickly be found in another. Ed and Lorraine called the priest, but he didn't seem to take it too seriously, and said to Annabelle that she couldn't hurt him because she was just a doll. That was a big mistake, because he was in a car accident on the way home. The car turned over, the brakes failed and his car was completely written off. Although the priest was badly hurt, he did survive. Annabelle is still around today, residing in the locked glass case that the Warrens built to keep her from getting free and roaming around their house. There is a warning sign on the case, saying "Do not touch," as well as a cross. Some say that they see Annabelle moving around the case, waiting to get free. Annabelle in The Conjuring wreaked havoc on those around her, and the real Annabelle doll most definitely did the same. The Conjuring doll is one of the spookiest tales in modern history when we talk about haunted objects, particularly because she had to be kept behind locked glass, and particularly because the Warrens didn't manage to rid the doll of the demon. Annabelle is still available to view today. Here is something that most people would agree is true about Robert the doll: he's terrifying. Ostensibly a little boy in a sailor suit, his careworn face is only vaguely human. His nub of a nose looks like a pair of pinholes. He is covered in brown nicks, like scars. His eyes are beady and black, and he wears a malevolent smirk. Clasped in his lap he's holding his own toy, which is a dog. It has garish popping eyes and a big tongue lolling crazily out of its mouth. Here are some other things that people also agree is true about Robert: that he's haunted and that he has caused car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce, and a cornucopia of other misfortunes. Robert is now 117 years old and lives at the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, in a new display case which was recently donated by someone who is a fan of Robert's, says Corey Convertito, curator of the museum. But the comfortable new digs, complete with humidity control and UV filtering glass to preserve the artifact, do not seem to have reformed Robert. The museum still gets regular reports of evils attributed to the doll. Before Robert came to the museum in 1994, he was the property of Robert Eugene Otto, an eccentric artist and member of a prominent Key West family. Yes, the doll and the owner had the same name, but the boy answered to Gene. Robert was a childhood birthday gift from Otto's grandfather, who bought the doll during a trip to Germany. Otto's relationship with the doll continued into adulthood. What people really remember is what they would probably term as an unhealthy relationship with the doll, says Convertito. He brought it everywhere, he talked about it in the first person as if he weren't a doll, he was Robert. As in he is a live entity. After some digging, the museum traced Robert's origins to the Steiff Company, the same toy maker that first manufactured a teddy bear in honor of Theodore Roosevelt. Robert was most likely never intended to be sold as a toy. A Steiff historian told the museum that Robert was probably part of a set fabricated for a window display of clowns or jesters. Which is kind of adorable, says Convertito, especially with his impish behavior. It kind of suits his personality really well. Robert's little sailor suit was not supplied by the company, it was probably an outfit that Otto himself wore as a child. According to legend, young Otto began to blame mishaps on the doll. While this could have been laughed off as childish storytelling, adults also started noticing odd occurrences, especially as Otto and Robert grew older. As an adult, Otto lived in a stately home he called the Artist House, where Robert could be seen positioned at the upstairs window. School children swore that he would appear and reappear, and they avoided the house. Myrtle Reuter purchased the Artist House after Otto's death in 1974, and also became Robert's new caretaker. Visitors swore they heard footsteps in the attic and giggling. Some claimed Robert's expression changed when anyone badmouthed Otto in his presence. Reuter said Robert would move around the house on his own, and after 20 years of antics, she donated him to the museum. But far from banishing Robert to obscurity, his arrival at the museum marked a turning point for the doll. Since Robert arrived, visitors have flocked to the museum to get a look at the mischievous toy. He has appeared on TV shows, he has had his aura photographed, he is a stop on a ghost tour, and he's inspired a horror movie. He has a Wikipedia entry and social media accounts. Fans can buy Robert replicas, books, coasters, and t-shirts, and the most adventurous can even volunteer to be locked in with Robert after dark. He gets probably 1 to 3 letters every day, says Convertito. But they aren't typical fan letters, they're often apologies. Many visitors attribute post-visit misfortunes to failing to respect Robert, or even openly disrespecting him, and they write begging forgiveness. Others ask him for advice, or to hex those who have wronged them. Convertito says they have received more than 1,000 letters, which they keep and catalog. Robert also receives emails and homages. At some point, it became known that Robert had a sweet tooth, so people leave and send him candy. Once he received a box containing 8 bags of peppermints, a card, and no return address. Exercising caution, the museum staff does not consume treats sent to Robert. Guests leave him sweets, money, and occasionally, joints. It's completely inappropriate, says Convertito. We are still a museum. Convertito is Robert's caretaker. Once a year she administers a checkup, taking him out of the case and weighing him to assess whether the humid Florida weather has adversely affected his straw-filled body. She is also his proxy, receiving and reading all his emails and letters and running his social media feeds. Several years ago she photoshopped Robert's knobby face onto the now famous picture of Kim Kardashian, popping a bottle of champagne into a glass balanced on her behind. It was in order to attract attention to a campaign that would score the museum a grant if they garnered enough votes. Through the combined forces of Kardashians and Robert's celebrity and the doll's social media reach, he has almost 9,000 Facebook likes. The museum won by a landslide. Occasionally, Convertito corresponds on Robert's behalf. She tries to send something to every child who writes him. Gene always had that childlike temperament around him, and we feel like Robert would want to be kind to children. And she has also responded to more poignant ones, such as an email from a girl who was being bullied at school. So, does Convertito think Robert is haunted? I don't know. I really don't, she says. I've never had a bad experience with him. I've never felt uncomfortable. It's always been a very basic relationship, and I have a job to do and I go and do it. And whether there's something to it or not, he just allows me to get on with my job. Thank you again for joining us for another video. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe and comment down below and let us know what you would like to hear in the near future. See you all again soon.